And welcome to our New Hampshire Preservation Alliance webinar, What Do Heritage Commissions Really Do? A candid conversation with Nathan Merrill and Maggie Stier. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Martha Cummings. I am the Community Preservation Services Manager with the Alliance, and my first webinar with you all. So excited to be here and good to see some familiar faces on this webinar tonight. Some of you may be familiar with, and some of you may not, the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance is the statewide membership-based historic preservation organization, and we are celebrating our 40th year. So a big thank you to our field service sponsors and alliance members. And to those of you who are not yet members, we hope you'll consider joining. Membership dollars support preservation advocacy at the state and local level, save more 7 to Save properties, and encourage more investment in preservation. So tonight's talk is actually a little bit of a preview, a kickoff as we head towards our 2025 Preservation Conference, almost exactly a month away, on October 2nd in Exeter, which will also include this year's 7 to Save announcement of listees. Registration is open, and I encourage you to register because it will be a wonderful, extended, more in-depth version of what we're doing tonight, more sessions, including a historic district commission session very specifically. Just a couple of housekeeping items. This Zoom webinar is being recorded tonight so that it can be posted on the Alliance's website. We're going to keep you all on mute, but please use the chat box for questions, which will be facilitated by our colleague Jennifer Goodman and our executive director, who is handling the chat box tonight. Thank you so much, Jennifer. And then we will take time to tackle your questions as we kind of head in the latter part of the discussion this evening. So our preservation style for tonight is more of a conversation between our two speakers, Maggie and Nate. We plan to cover some broad topics about heritage commissions, such as getting started with your commission, funding, relationship building, planning tools, etc. We'll see how far we get because we have a lot to cover, but it should be very interesting. We also want to make sure that we make time for your questions. So the goal, of course, is to help you better understand what goes on behind the scenes or in the scenes of heritage commissions with two seasoned members of their respective commissions in their towns. And then after this presentation, just really quick, we will be sending a follow-up email to each of you who are attending this evening with some Heritage Commission resources and a link to webinars on the Alliance's website, where we have a kind of a nuts and bolts Heritage Commission 101 presentation that Maggie did a couple years ago. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our speakers. Let me just go to our next slide here. 1 second. There we go. Sorry for that. Nathan Merrill is a dairy farmer and longtime member of Stratham's Heritage Commission, currently serving as chair. He has a lifelong interest in local history and has worked to build awareness and preservation of natural and cultural resources. He's also a great friend of the Preservation Alliance, and you can meet Nathan in person at the Preservation Conference, where he will be doing a session on preservation planning. So Nate, welcome, and thank you for being here tonight. Did you want to say a little something about the images that we're looking at on the screen? Oh, hold on 1 second. Sorry about that.
Can you hear me now okay?
Yeah.
Excellent. So the images on your screen are some of the things that the Stratham Heritage Commission has worked on during the time of its existence. The upper left photo of the Richard Scammon farm is on River Road, and that's a relatively recent achievement where we were able to get that property and several others adjoining it listed to the National Register of Historic Places as a National Historic District, which is a first for Stratham. The picture in the top right is our Veterans Memorial Garden, which was one of the first projects that the Heritage Commission undertook when that was before I was serving on the board. On the bottom left is the Samuel and Jabez Lane homestead, which I won't get into the details here, but they were both very significant figures and both kept detailed 18th century diaries, journals, and records, which are recognized as some of the most important records of 18th century life in New Hampshire. The property is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. It was threatened with demolition and redevelopment a number of years ago, and the Stratham Heritage Commission worked with the Preservation Alliance to get it listed on the 7 to Save, and we were ultimately able to fund a preservation easement and permanently protect it, which is held by the Preservation Alliance. So we're deeply appreciative for the support of the Alliance in that project. And then the bottom right and the center photographs are our old town hall, Stratham's only purpose-built town hall. It was constructed in 1877. It also was threatened with demolition. We saved it literally by the skin of our teeth, and 79E was critical in making that possible. We're going to get into that a little bit more later in the talk this evening. So there's a modern day picture of it there after it was redeveloped by a developer into apartments, and in the center, of course, is the 19th century image.
Great. Thank you, Nate. All right, our next speaker. Let me get a slide to change here. Welcome, Maggie, my fellow colleague at the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance. Maggie has been with the Alliance since 2006, with a few years off to return to the museum field in which she spent the first 30 years of her career. She was instrumental in the formation of the Wolfeboro Heritage Commission in 2016 and served as chair for its first 8 years and is still a very active member. Welcome, Maggie, and thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Martha, and hello to everyone. I just put up 4 slides of some of the projects and things that we're involved with, and I'll start with the upper left. We have just finished our 3rd year of Heritage Awards and are very proud of that program, and it gives us great visibility in the community. On the upper right is the Living Museum, which we nominated to 7 to Save last year. And we've been, a subcommittee of the Heritage Commission has been working very hard on finding solutions for that endangered property. On the lower left is our old municipal electric building. Wolfeboro is one of only a handful of towns in the state that has its own electric department still, although the power is not generated in this building anymore. But the Heritage Commission was instrumental in getting a Plan New Hampshire charrette to look at options for reuse. And then in the lower right is one of the many barns in town that we're so very proud of, representative of our architectural heritage and protected with an RSA 79D barn easement. So we'll talk more about those programs later, but thank you.
All right, thank you both. So at this juncture, I think we're going to stop screen sharing so that we can see the two of you better. And so for those of you out in the world of Zoom, if you adjust your screen so that you view only the speakers or multiple speakers, then you can see Nate and Maggie as we're having this facilitated conversation. So we're going to kick it off with a number of these broad topics that I spoke about at the beginning here. And so starting out, now both of your commissions were created in different decades, Stratham in 1997, Wolfeboro in 2016. So what sparked their formation and what were some of your first priorities?
Maggie, you want to go ahead?
Okay, I thought Martha was going to call on you.
I'm not going to call on anyone.
Oh, okay. Our town had a 3-year protracted debate over what to do with our historic town hall. And it took several warrant articles before something finally passed to rehabilitate it, as opposed to selling it or tearing it down or moving the town offices out of the downtown. And it came out really beautifully. And people suddenly were aware that historic preservation was a real force, a positive force in our community. So it was in that milieu that we proposed a Heritage Commission, and it passed on the first vote on the warrant article. But we had done several public presentations about it, including one at the deliberative session. And I took around a PowerPoint that talked to various groups in the community, so everybody knew what it was. Our town had had a historic district commission, which had been abolished 20 or 25 years beforehand. And there's always confusion between the two. So we were able to clear that up with the publicity that we did beforehand. Also on the warrant article, obviously people are going to say, well, how much does this cost to have this commission? And we asked for a very modest $500 budget. And I think people appreciated that too. The town recognized that nobody really was paying attention to its historic resources. And I think with that town hall success, a lot of people were on board.
So Stratham established its commission about almost 20 years before Wolfeboro's. Although we had never had a historic district commission, we've never had a historic district. In fact, we don't really even have a historic village center, as most New Hampshire towns do, because it was a farming community with no centralized mills or commercial activity. But there was dramatic growth that was happening in town through the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And I think the people felt that the fabric of the community was changing before our very eyes, and we were losing control of it. There were a number of very beautiful colonial and federal period houses and barns that were lost to commercial development along Route 108 and to residential subdivisions. So I think there was a building awareness that people wanted to recognize and try and protect some of the resources that we still had in town. The commission started out with a very modest budget as Wolfeboro, and I think I wasn't involved at the time, but my impression is that they struggled the first few years to figure out what they should focus on. And but in more recent years, we've had a lot more better defined mission and assistance from the Preservation Alliance, and we've really come together as a group. We've worked really hard to lift our profile in the community and build positive working relationships with town staff and other boards and commissions. So I think it's worked out quite well.
Martha, there was a second part to that question, I think, which is what projects did you do first? And I think Nate would agree that getting your rules of procedure in place is really important to do first. We stepped up and offered to help the selectmen with the barn easements that already existed in the town. And they were very grateful for that. We borrowed from Wolfeboro. They had a form that they used, so that was terrific. And reported to the selectmen annually at the selectmen's meeting. So again, more visibility for us. We did an information session on 79D with Beverly Thomas, who came up and talked about barn easements and promoted that. And then we were fortunate that the town was just beginning their 10-year revision of the master plan. And so we stepped forward and said, we want to work on a historic and cultural resources chapter. So that gave us the opportunity to become a player in the town government.
Yes, I second all of that. Our timing was also good in that the master plan was redone in 1998, so 1 year after the commission was established. In Stratham, one of the first things they undertook was that Veterans Memorial Garden. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that as a first lift. I agree that getting your rules and procedures in place and priorities in place, listening to your constituents. I would highly recommend that a very early priority should be a town-wide inventory. And that's a heavy lift. We initially tried to do it with volunteer labor. We had some training workshops. We tried to get some volunteers, and it's too, in our experience, it was too much. And it just didn't happen. We flailed with it for years. And we finally came to the reasoning that we had to hire a consultant to get that done. And we were able to obtain the funding because we could make the case that it needed to be done. And that really, it's a hard thing for communities to ask for that kind of money, especially the smaller towns, but it's such an incredibly important resource, and it helps to guide our work, and it helps to give us more credibility. If we go to advocate for something, we can say, look, this third-party professional identified this building as particularly important, and that it's not just us wringing our hands and saying, please save this, we like it. So it really, it's an important step if you can muster the funding to get it done.
We
think-
too did that, and we did not have a building by building inventory. It was a townwide area form, but the amount of money we were requesting was a drop in the bucket overall. And again, I think there are enough new people in the community who cared about protecting the character of the town that they carried the day, as well as the old timers, and it was a good thing that we did that. All right, with our new planner now, we're working very carefully to get him up to speed on that.
You both have touched upon certainly a number of other things that we want to get a little further into, and one is, resources and funding as being really rather important. As Nate, you mentioned, being able to save a property and not sort of be out there going help. And so do you want to just talk a little bit more on some of your approaches, and also, because there is a provision in the RSA that heritage commissions, can accept funding and can accept donations to that heritage fund. And so could you just talk a little further on how you've done it in Stratham and what you're working on, Maggie, in Wolfeboro? Because as you pointed out, there are all sorts of, every town is unique and at various levels of being able to fund the Heritage Commission, but just some other ideas outside of even asking, for your town taxpayers to build that fund. What are some of the ways?
So I think the most important thing is to build positive working relationships with leaders in the community, and that's other boards and commissions and town staff. And then, of course, when you have something on the warrant, it's critical to reach out to the entire community. But you know, it's a never-ending effort to involve, educate select board members, planning board members, board of adjustment members, and town planners and town administrators, because they're always changing. There's always a continual churn of the people who are involved. And so that's something that we really focus on, especially those of us who have served as chairs, is to really build and maintain those relationships. That goes a long way toward, you know, if there's something that comes up that's urgent, we can go to these people and say, help. And they know that we're serious and they know that we're credible. So I think that's really helpful. In terms of the broader community, we do all the usual things like trying to utilize traditional media and social media and the annual town report. We have a blurb in there reporting to the citizens what we've done each year. We piggyback onto the select board's email newsletter that goes out to, I think, close to 1,000 homes in Stratham. So we try and do all of those things to build awareness and educate the public. And the last thing I'll mention is we do have a very successful annual educational program for the public. And that also builds awareness and builds support in the broader community. It's usually very well attended, usually 60 to 80 people come. And it's in the winter, so people come out of their houses in the winter and come see what we have to talk about.
Let's talk a little bit about your funding, Nate, and then I'll follow up with a little bit about ours.
Sure. So the commission originally started with a modest operating budget like Wolfeboro, probably in the neighborhood of $1,000. I wasn't there at the time. When I joined the commission, the operating budget was in the neighborhood of $3,000, $2,000 or $3,000. And there was a modest savings account, which Maggie mentioned you can accept donations, and we had occasions where people wanted to donate for this or for that. So we had a modest savings account and the modest operating budget. And during the financial crisis, 2007, 2008, there was a very significant National Register house in Stratham that was foreclosed on and was really at risk. And the asking price at the time was like $120,000. And we were really terrified that we were going to lose this building. And we said to ourselves, if only we had that money, we could buy it, fix it, put an easement on it, and resell it. We don't need to own it forever. We don't need to burden taxpayers with maintenance forever, but we could at least save it and then resell it with some protection on it. And so that led us to seek a capital reserve fund. So we went to the town meeting. We did a big, outreach push to the community. The select board endorsed it. Thankfully, that made it easier to get people to vote for it. And in the first year, voters approved establishing it, but they declined to put any money in it, which is not unusual, especially in New Hampshire, I think. But then the next year, we asked for $50,000, and the voters said yes. And the year after that, we asked for $50,000, and the voters said yes. And so it's been very successful, and that's how we paid for our townwide inventory. It's how we've helped pay for our preservation easements.
Wonderful.
Maggie, did you want to say any?
I just wanted to mention the Plan New Hampshire charrette, which was a great tool for us and an opportunity to get some in-kind contribution to help gather some experts through Plan New Hampshire to do a 2-day planning exercise for a part of our community that included that old municipal electric building. And we weren't sure what was going to happen to that. Right next to it was an old fire station that was in very poor condition. And so planners, architects, traffic engineers came to Wolfeboro in 2021 and spent a couple of days brainstorming ideas among themselves and engaging the public to get their feedback and engaging town officials as well. And it resulted in a little booklet. It's online. I don't know if people can see this, but it was a very successful event. And we were able to just go to the town manager and the planning department. And they said they would cover the fee that Plan New Hampshire charges. And then we got businesses to donate food, and it worked out very well. So that's one way to fund things. The other is just a straight warrant article, as we did for a town survey. And then for our Heritage Awards, we do invite businesses to sponsor those. And that covers our expenses for doing that. And the
That's great.
businesses are very generous, and we're an organization that a couple businesses in town really want to support. So it's nice.
Before we move on, because I really want to dive into some of your strategies for, relationship building across the town, offices and community. But before we do that, just, we have a clarification question. Just what is the difference between having a capital reserve fund and the Heritage Fund? And, either one of you want to take that?
I can, yep. So the capital reserve fund is something that is, it's like if you go to town meeting and you vote on the capital improvements program, and you're saving money for a new fire truck down the road, or you're saving money for a new roof on the school down the road. It's appropriating capital money for future needs. And in our case, it can be set up different ways, but in Stratham's case, we set it up so that the Heritage Commission and the Select Board both have to vote to withdraw money from that fund, so that gave people another comfort level with that. It won't just be spent willy-nilly on whatever we feel like. There's 2 stages of accountability there. So it's separate from the savings account where we have the donations, and it's separate from the annual operating budget.
So the Heritage Fund really is just a separate fund that the Heritage Commission can establish. It's non-lapsing, and it can fund their activities. So
Great.
it's explained in the handbook, but that's the difference. Capital reserve funds are across the board in town government for various departments. A Heritage Fund is unique to the Heritage Commission.
You mentioned the handbook, Maggie. Do you just want to wave it up and then we'll move on? And but something that the Preservation Alliance has available.
I'm happy to do
everyone.
that. This is the Heritage Fund page, but there are 4 or 5 pages on Heritage Commissions, and I know Martha's going to send that to everyone. It has been vital to educating our members. Almost everybody who came on the Heritage Commission really had no idea what the Heritage Commission was or was expected to do. So and I was fortunate that I worked for the Preservation Alliance, so I had a lot of resources at my fingertips. This may not be the time to say this, but I really do feel that education of Heritage Commission members should be an ongoing priority, so that people attend webinars like this, go to conferences, get a copy of the handbook when they join the Heritage Commission, and maybe even have time for education at every session so that people learn about the various tools. When they're needed, then people are on board and can say, yes, that's exactly what we need. Maybe we need demo review. Maybe we need to help with the state register nomination for this building. And so people are comfortable with that. One of the other neat things that we've done in Wolfeboro is convened a Lakes Region Heritage Commission gathering a couple of times. And the last one we did was in I think it was a year ago. In the winter, we had
Indeed.
chili. It was a great gathering, and each community spoke, sharing a little bit about what projects they were working on, and then being able to get feedback on where they were having challenges. So I would encourage people to consider doing something like that as well.
Maggie,
That's
what,
great. And then, oh, sorry, go ahead, Nathan.
yeah, I was just going to ask Maggie, when you meet regionally, which there was an attempt with some of the Seacoast area Heritage Commissions to do this a few years ago, and it kind of petered out. I think it's you've got to have a point person, I think, to sort of keep it going. Is that a role that you are playing, or Wolfeboro is playing, or is it or is it more loosely defined than that?
I think the impetus behind it came from Wolfeboro and Christina Ashton, who's a very active leader in their Heritage Commission and very plugged into the Preservation Alliance's resource. And because we live close by, I think both of us collaborated on that. The Heritage Commission list from the Preservation Alliance was particularly helpful for us. And as you said, the cast of characters changes all the time, so it is a little bit tricky to keep up with it. We actually have term limits on our Heritage Commission. I know some people don't, but I think that's a very good thing to have too. So we've tried to do it every year, and people love it. Usually there's a little bit of education and then a lot of just interaction and learning from each other.
Sharing ideas and so forth.
We talked a little bit about the master plan, and I know we're going to talk about how to work with town committees. We have had the challenge of really establishing credibility, and we were a little bit behind the 8 ball because of the confusion between historic district commissions and now a new Heritage Commission. We were very proactive in working with other town boards and offering our expertise. We have a liaison on our committee to the Historical Society who's very willing to provide research information from their files. We have a liaison, obviously, from the Board of Selectmen and one from the Planning Board. And so pretty early on, we were invited to help with projects that other boards were doing, or invited to just present our work to the Economic Development Commission or the Agriculture Commission, so that there was a lot of back and forth within our small circle of volunteers who help run the town. And then we took a very proactive role. I know the definition says advise when invited other town boards, but we just advised in public meetings like planning board meetings or ZBA meetings. When there was something that had to do with a historic resource, we had a lot to add, which was to share the history and significance of the building, which, you know, maybe nobody else had really bothered to check on. And that is a very persuasive piece of information when decisions are being made about the future of a property. So that helped to establish relationships and build credibility as well.
Maggie and Nate, as we are talking about these important relationships in town and some of the strategies you've been using, Maggie, you did talk about some of the other commissions and boards in town, and I think we have another just a clarification question that has come up in terms of the difference between historical society and a historic commission. And so we are discussing heritage commissions tonight. And you mentioned Historical Society and that you were in touch with them. Could you both just touch upon briefly the differences and also just to share with our group again, you will receive a link to a webinar that is truly a nuts and bolts Heritage Commissions 101 webinar that will break down the differences in a little bit more depth, historical societies, historic district commissions, and heritage commissions. But Maggie, do you, or Nate, do you want to just take that real quick?
I'd like to jump in here if I may. Every town is different. Every historical, if your town has a historical society, they might have a very robust program of public education on history. So you don't want to co-opt that or step on toes. And I think because we have a representative from the Historical Society on our Heritage Commission, we have forestalled any problems. And in fact, we tried to collaborate as much as we can. And I think that's a great way to do it. But we have thought about their role as more collecting and interpreting the past, and ours is more forward-looking. So it's managing the historic resources for the future. And we try very hard to protect historic buildings, and then we'll refer to the Historical Society when we need actual history of those historic buildings. Now that we have a townwide survey, we have a little bit more information. And obviously, if there's been a state register or a national register nomination, there's a lot more information. And we don't necessarily have to call on them. So I hope that clarifies things a little.
Yeah.
I like that distinction, Maggie, between the planning for the future and the preserving the past. I think that's an important distinction. There is a lot of confusion in the communities about the differences. They view us as the same. The other thing I tell people is that a Heritage Commission is a division of municipal government. We're accountable to the select board and ultimately the taxpayers, whereas a historical society is a nonprofit, independent group of people. And the difference essentially between a Heritage Commission and a Historic District Commission is Heritage Commission is advisory and an HDC is regulatory. So those are the other distinctions that I often use with people to try and explain the differences, because the broader community really doesn't understand.
And I always say, I'm not surprised you're confused. The terminology is so much alike for these organizations. Yeah. So just gentle reminders all the time. And when we come before the Board of Selectmen or any other board, I always say, I'm from the Heritage Commission. We report to the selectmen and we are advisory only. So, yeah.
That's great. So we're at 7:30. I'm gonna try and weave in some more questions that are coming through the chat. But just really quick, kind of circling back to, you've talked about some of those strategies, building relationships among the town boards and office staff and other committees and whatnot. But on community engagement, with the broader community, I've heard Nate, you talk about, we want to offer more yeses than nos, and not be seen in a positive light. When people think about the Heritage Commission, they don't go, you want them to go yes rather than oh, and so what are some of your strategies or programs or communications that kind of get you out there and get the word out about the Heritage Commission in a positive light? And I know you each have some different programs, so it'd be great to just touch upon that.
So this is not easy, especially with the demise of local newspapers and the growth of our communities. So they're more disparate, and so it's getting harder, not easier. And social media is a tool. You have to have somebody on your commission who's good at it. We don't right now, so we're not terribly active. We're not as active on it as we should be, frankly. So I completely agree with Maggie that the master planning process is so important, and that is something that brings in the broader community into planning, land use discussions, and we we really want to have a big seat at the table in those discussions as heritage commissions. And Maggie also mentioned agricultural commissions. Fewer towns have those. There are some, but not many. In Stratham, we have often felt and expressed that agriculture is Stratham's heritage, and so we advocate for agricultural resources equally with saving an old house. I think that's an important thing to remember too. But no, the community engagement's tough. In our case, the public program is really helpful. I think, Maggie mentioned not stepping on toes with the Historical Society, and that's a great point. In our case, we picked a month where the Historical Society traditionally has not had a program. So they have programs in January and March and May, and we picked February so that we weren't, duplicating efforts or stepping on their toes. So that is something to be aware of in your decision making. How about you guys up in Wolfeboro, Matt? You must.
We're fortunate that we have a relatively new member who really likes doing social media, and that's terrific. We still have a local newspaper, although it's not widely read, but we have used letters to the editor and various articles to our advantage. I want to talk briefly about the Heritage Awards that we started doing, because that does give us a great deal of visibility. It's 100% positive. We issue a call for nominations in January or February, and then make some decisions and do our program in May, which is National Preservation Month. So the timing is good. It's also when the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance does their awards program. So there's a lot in the news, and we've tried to honor individuals, several from the Historical Society or people who have rehabbed important historic landmarks in the community. And then just newer rehabilitations or revivals of buildings for new use. And 4 or 5 awards a year, or 5 or 6. It's free. We get a hall donated to us, and as I said, we get donations to cover refreshments. So we get around 80 people or so, and then our press release gets printed in the newspaper verbatim, and the photo I showed is captioned the 2025 Heritage Award winners, and that goes into the town report so people can see what we're doing. And the narrative also talks about the other things that we do. So again, a very positive thing.
It's a great concept. I love it.
Yeah, the awards, I mean,
So there's a toolkit on the Preservation Alliance website, or it's available if you ask, I guess, that gives you all the templates of everything we did, including the call for nominations, a timeline of how to schedule the various jobs that you have to do to make the awards come off, templates for press releases. So if your town does want to start one, we'll just hand you all this stuff that Wolfeboro did. We adapted ours from the Preservation Alliance's awards program. So it's pretty much an off-the-shelf project if you want to take that on. And we'd love to have more towns do it because it is great publicity and really positive, just reinforcing the good things that are going on in the community.
that's excellent. Thank you, Maggie.
There's one more thing I want to add, Martha, that I forgot when we talked about community engagement, and that is we do utilize, the select board has an email newsletter blast that goes out, I believe, every other week. And they're great about soliciting stuff to put in there. And we do keep a Heritage Commission presence there as well.
That's a
Your
really
town is
good way of,
fortunate.
yeah, getting the word out to the whole community. We do have some questions that have come in. So this one, we're going to go back a little bit to funding. The question is, can grant money be put in the Heritage Commission fund for use on a specific project? And second question to that is, can the Heritage Commissions write grants?
So,
You mean grant applications?
Yeah,
yes. So
um,
Moose Plate is a perfect example. The Conservation License Plate Grant Program, which was not active this last year. Municipalities do qualify for that. So that's a perfect opportunity for a Heritage Commission to write a grant application. Many and LCHIP will accept municipal applications as well. We've not done that, but what we have done is assisted other groups that are seeking grants like that. So I've helped on a couple of LCHIP applications for other groups in town. Nate, do you have anything to add?
We have done a successful LCHIP grant. So we matched local money from our capital reserve fund with the LCHIP grant in order to buy a preservation easement on the Lane homestead. So that is definitely, that was one of the ways we marketed the capital reserve fund idea to the town, was that if we had match money readily available, it would make it easier and to get grants, that we'd have more competitive applications because we'd have that match already in hand.
Yeah. I know some heritage commissions are more active in acquiring properties than ours is. And I think there's just a little bit of hesitation because we are still pretty young about getting into caring for and maintaining historic properties. It doesn't mean that we might not do it at some point, but I think it's better if we work with owners and advocate for good outcomes for historic buildings than trying to own them. The town already owns a lot of historic properties. One of the things that we did, though, was to advocate for not tearing down a railroad freight house and instead trying to find someone who could rehabilitate it and reuse it. And so that's one of the buildings that makes me smile when I go past it, because that's a real success story to get somebody else to take on a historic property, and they were able to get some grant funding for that and get it on the state register with our help.
We have had success in that realm too. And in our case, the town did acquire a historic property and ultimately sell it with a preservation easement. So we have in our case actually purchased property, but that was voted on at town meeting and the select board supported it. And the Heritage Commission itself can't own it, but the town can own it. And so it's ultimately up to the select board. You have to convince them. And but it is unusual, but in certain cases, I think it's worth doing to save something if that's what needs to be done. And we also do, I should add, we also advise the select board. You mentioned that Wolfeboro does own several historic properties. Stratham does too. For example, behind Stratham Hill Park, there is a historic farm there that the town owns now, has owned for 30 or 40 years. And the Heritage Commission provides guidance to the select board on if renovations are requested on the house, or window or door changes, or things like that. So we try and provide counsel to the select board on other buildings.
Thank you both. And Maggie, you sort of touched on the fringe of demolition, and I don't know if and each of your heritage commissions, I think, are working with the towns on various demolition verbiage and ordinances and whatnot. Do you want to say any more about working closely with your towns on demolition delays or demolition reviews? I know that is a hot topic that comes up. It's something we get calls about at the Alliance. So just your experiences there.
Can I start and then we'll go to you in your neighborhood heritage district?
Sure.
Because I think demolition review ordinances are a difficult tool in this state. And they often lead to negativity. And you don't want your Heritage Commission to have a pitched battle against the forces of economic development, for instance, over saving a certain place. And a historic district is wonderful, which is more regulatory to preserve a certain area or group of buildings. That's also a difficult tool to get past. And of course, in our town, as I said, it may never happen again. But a neighborhood heritage district is a fairly new, innovative land use statute that Stratham has done. I think you're the only town in the state that has done it. And it allows for regulation with a much lighter touch. So I'd love for you to talk about that. And then the other thing is we have adopted design review standards as part of site plan review. And so any multifamily or commercial building has to go through site plan review. We don't have any say over individual residential properties, but that site plan review process with the architectural standards has made a difference in Wolfeboro. So take it away, Nate, neighborhood heritage districts.
Well, okay, I will. And I also want to concur with your opinion about demo review. I had really mixed emotions when we sought to establish a demo review for that reason, a fear of negativity. And it's actually worked out pretty well. We pick our battles. But the ones that are really important, we have been able to save. In one example, there was property owners died and the children inherited the property and they wanted to subdivide it. There was enough land to subdivide it, but not enough frontage with where the historic house sat. So they wanted to tear down the historic house to split it in two and sell two house lots. And we went in there and we said, as part of the demo review, we went in and we said, you know, it doesn't meet current zoning code to do a so-called pork chop lot anymore. But in your case, if we could advocate to the Board of Adjustment to allow a pork chop lot to save the historic house, you could subdivide it, put a new house in back, keep the historic house in front. And they agreed with us. The children said, okay, yes, we're willing to try that. And so we went to the ZBA and we supported their application and it was granted. So there are examples of demo review working in a positive way. But you're right, it's a difficult tool in New Hampshire that we don't have many teeth in it. It's impossible to have too many teeth in it in New Hampshire. Massachusetts is a whole different story. It's something we struggle with. We're struggling now with demo by neglect on a couple of important properties in town, and that's an even harder nut to crack. But to move on to the neighborhood heritage district, it is new. According to Jennifer and other folks there, we are the only ones in the state that have passed it so far. The jury's still out on how effective it will be. We have had some proposals. I would say that none of them were really what we had hoped for or envisioned. So I think the jury's out on how effective it's going to be, but I remain hopeful ultimately that it will be helpful.
What does it regulate?
So it's hard to explain. I'm not a planner and I'm not very good at that technical stuff, but there are design and architectural review requirements, which we do not have in the rest of the residential and agricultural zone. So like you spoke about in Wolfeboro, you've got some design review now in your site plan process. So the neighborhood heritage district gives us that. It also, for years, for those of you who are familiar with Stratham, the neighborhood heritage district is along Route 33, which runs between the center of Stratham and over to Greenland and ultimately to Portsmouth. So it's a very busy road. It's a state road, used to be Route 101. And we heard from property owners for years that, they couldn't sell their homes because nobody wanted to live on such a busy road. And so they were neglecting their houses and they were starting to fall down. So the impetus behind this was to say to property owners, okay, we'll allow some expanded uses and a little more density in exchange for more restrictions on historic buildings in that zone, and in exchange for architectural review, so that new construction, so that we can review new construction and make sure it's compatible and complementary to the old historic properties. So those were the goals. That was the impetus, and it's a work in progress. We'll see.
I think we can send some more information out with regard to the National Heritage or Historic District, excuse me, because we are coming up to the top of the hour. So I just want to make sure that we get to, there are just a couple of questions I think that we could tackle quickly. One is a Heritage Commission able to take on the responsibilities or double as an agricultural commission? Maggie or Nate?
Never heard of that. They can serve also as a historic district commission, but I'm not sure the statute allows that. But maybe Jennifer and Nate can answer.
I don't think statutorily, no. I was speaking more philosophically that we in Stratham feel like we advocate for agricultural resources as a Heritage Commission, but it's informal. We view it as part of our mission, given that it was historically a farm town. But it's not. You're right. It's a separate. There's state RSAs that set up ag commissions and heritage commissions, conservation commissions. So you can't have the same board doing the same each mission. But in our case, we've taken it upon ourselves to advocate for agriculture in town.
Okay. Nate, there's interest in your community education program, and just wondering if you have a link to more information about that, maybe on the town's website or something that we can share with everyone.
I sure can.
Okay.
I sure can.
That'd be great.
After the program, and there's a page on our website that has all the past programs are recorded and they're on there, so you can actually watch them if you want to.
Okay, that would be awesome, and then we can send that out to everyone, and if they have some specific detailed questions on how you set that up, they can get in touch with you. So appreciate
Sure.
that.
Sure.
So we are inching to 8 o'clock, and I want to make sure that we are respectful of everyone's time. And so thank you all for joining us. As you can see, we've only just touched upon many topics that we could really dive into with Heritage Commission. So Maggie and Nate, thank you so much for your time, sharing your insights and experiences on your respective Heritage Commissions. Really appreciate that. Jennifer, thank you for manning the chat. I know we're trying to get to everyone's questions here, and the question on the handbook, I'll give you the answer for that in just a second. And to all of you who joined us this evening, thank you so much for participating in our discussion on Heritage Commissions. And as I said at the beginning, we'll be sending a follow-up email that will include a number of the resources that we mentioned this evening. This webinar, our discussion, will be posted on our website in the next week or so, and we'll let you know when that gets up on the website. A reminder, we do have our preservation conference again coming up on October 2nd. You can register for that now on our website, and you can hear Nate again speaking on preservation planning, and the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance staff will all be there, along with wonderful sessions from other presenters on a variety of preservation topics, including a specific session on historic district commissions. And our 7 to Save 2025 listees will be announced that evening as well. For those of you interested in our handbook that Maggie and I were referencing earlier, you can again find that on our website in our shop and purchase a copy, the entire handbook. You will be receiving in the follow-up email the chapter on heritage commissions, so that will come to you. And I believe that is it for this evening. Jennifer and Maggie and Nate, thank you so much for participating, and thank you all for joining us this evening. And if you do have follow-up questions, you can send those directly to us. You can send it to me. I'm MC@NH Preservation. I can put that in the chat right now. Region.org. Sorry, can't. It's terrible typing and talking at the same time. So thank you all. Have a great evening. Appreciate you being here, and we look forward to seeing you at the conference.